Welcome to the very first episode of Beyond the Silence podcast. I am your host, Lisa Toma. So, as the very first episode, I have been wanting to create this podcast for so long, and the time has finally come. I just felt like this was the perfect time. I felt this drive in me that I'm ready. I was always in my head, didn't know where to start, and I was divinely guided to my podcast videographer, and everything just kind of stemmed from there. So I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to be able to create this space where I can share my story and where others can share their stories beyond the silence of everyone's traumas, stories, things that we hold onto from our past that we're ready to let go so that we can show up in the world as the best, absolute best versions of ourselves. So to start my story, I grew up in the Vaughan area, typical Italian family, typical Italian upbringing. I'm the oldest sibling of four. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad owned a pizzeria and restaurant business. So, like, again, you could say that I grew up in a very typical Italian home, and I had a lot of friends. And it was, besides having the episodes of the domestic violence going on in the home. My dad wasn't home very often. So I do feel like I thought we were living just, normal life. And fast forwarding to high school, living the best life, having so much fun with my friends, skipping the occasional classes here and there. And one day at school, sitting in class, and I'll never forget, I was wearing baby blue running shoes. We were not allowed to be wearing baby blue running shoes. We had a very strict uniform, and I remember getting called down to the office. So my first immediate thought was, great, I'm gonna get in trouble for my shoes again. So I had gone straight to my locker, changed my shoes into the black shoes that I was supposed to be wearing, and I made my way down to the principal's office. When I walked in, I saw my brother, who's 2 years older than me, was also sitting in the office, which I found was really weird. So I asked him, what are you doing here? And it just seemed strange. Something was off, but I still didn't really think much of it, to be honest. We were brought into the back room, and I remember the vice principal, who I didn't really get along with, kind of like rubbed my back as I walked by. And I immediately felt something was really strange, but still not thinking that we were about to find out what we found out. So we go into the back room, and it was my brother's 16th birthday. And we go into this back room, and there's two police officers sitting in there. And we sat at the table, and in that moment, I really thought that my mom was finally leaving, and she had sent the police officers to our school to come and get us. So I was sitting there with this anticipation, waiting for the police to say, well, your mom had left, blah, blah, blah. So then he continues his sentence and says, there is a woman in your home who appears to be your mom, and she is not alive. And I immediately fell to the ground. I remember hearing my brother yell. So then I immediately fell to the ground, and they hadn't yet told me how my mom passed, but I already knew. And I remember just crying and screaming on the floor. And I said, it was my dad. That's what I said. And the police said that we have reason to believe the same thing. Can you please tell us why? And then after that, I have no idea what I said. I probably completely dissociated. It was the worst nightmare. They ended up taking my brother and I in separate police cars to the police station. And I remember getting there immediately looking for my little brother and my little sister. And I refused to go into any room or speak to anybody until I saw them and knew that they were okay. And then from there, it was so scary because in my mind, I was like, now what? Like, we lost our mom, we lost our dad. Where are we going? Where are we going to live? Who's here? Who's going to come get us? The first thing you think of when you're left somewhere is you're going to call your mom to come pick you up. And in that moment, all of my safety and the safety of my siblings were completely robbed from us. We had no idea what was next for us. So at the end of all of our interviews, I remember it being late at night by this point, and my uncle, my mom's brother, was there, and he came and he took us to his home. And I remember not even being able to turn the TV on. It was on every single news station, every channel we turned to that was the news, was the video of our driveway with my mom's minivan in the driveway. And it was just a complete nightmare that we had to wake up and relive every single day for years. We stayed at my uncle's. We had to stay there for about a good 2 to 3 weeks. The plan was for us to go and stay with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, but they had just lost their only daughter as well. So they were not okay. Both of my grandparents were in a very, very fragile state and grieving. And we were grieving. So we stayed with my uncle and my aunt at the time for a good 2 to 3 weeks. I don't really remember much of it. And that happens when you experience traumatic things, you dissociate and kind of block those things out. So fast forward, we move into my grandparents' house in Bolton. And now there's the four of us here with grieving grandparents who only speak Italian. I was the only one who understood and spoke the language. And so now there's a huge language barrier. I was 18, my brother was 16, my sister was 14, and my little brother was 8. So there was a lot of navigating that we had to do. I had just graduated high school. Well, I was in the middle of high school. And now it's like, now what? What do we do? And every morning I remember crying myself to sleep every single night to my mom's voice on her voicemail of her cell phone. And sorry. And waking up in the morning, not realizing where I was, and then remembering all over again what had happened. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't believe that it was true. I remember visualizing lying in my room and my mom just walking through the door saying that everything was okay and none of this happened. And these are the places that my mind went to try and cope because it was so big that I didn't know how to deal with it or cope with it, that my mind started wanting to create these scenarios to create a little bit of safety. So, with the support of my uncle's girlfriend at the time, she took on a big role in our lives, and she had brought all of us to see a psychologist to be able to see somebody to talk through these things that we were experiencing. And we did go, we had a few sessions, and I can speak for myself with this. At the time, I didn't feel that it helped me. It was actually something that I dreaded doing and going to. I don't know if it's because of the stage that I was at that time and I didn't want to talk about it. But I also felt like this was something that I wanted to kind of just process on my own. And I didn't feel the psychologist was much help to me. So I know that it can be somewhat common when you're dealt with very traumatic experiences. You turn to outside sources to kind of numb the pain and help you cope with basically your traumas, like substance abuse, alcohol, just like toxic behaviors and antidepressants, pharmaceutical drugs and stuff like that. And I do remember seeing my family doctor, who actually knew my mom very well. And she, my first appointment, had suggested or asked me if I wanted her to write me a prescription, for antidepressants. And I immediately said no. And I remember saying to her, I do not want antidepressants because I know that that's not something my mom would want me to do. And I do feel like that comes from the strong foundation that my mom had built for us. She did talk to me a lot. My mom was 36 when she passed, and I was 18. So I do feel like the dynamic of our relationship was more of like a big sister relationship, where she did talk to me very openly about things. And I feel like just her point of view and the lessons that she taught me. And there was one thing that she always said to me, which I think could be one of the main reasons why I didn't turn to substance abuse or any numbing agents. She would always say to me, when you find yourself in a difficult situation, it's hard to see what's going on when you're in it. But if you remove yourself from that situation and act as a bystander looking in, things become so much more clearer, and you can see the big picture of what needs to be done and who you need to be. And it could be that. And we also did, my grandparents gave us a strong foundation too, even through their grief. And I'm so, so grateful for that, because I know that substance abuse or any numbing agents are a very, very easy thing to turn to. And that is probably one of the things that I'm grateful for. This is my trauma. And on the next episode, I'm going to be talking about how I fought through the coming years leading into today and the struggles and obstacles I went through to get there. You can find me on Instagram at This Is Healing Official and on my website at www.thisishealing.ca.